Eli Drinkwitz addresses questions about his future in much the same way that Lane Kiffin did. Feel better now?
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And thanks for making the Locked On Podcast Network your number one sports podcasting network. By the way, Dennis Gates finally addresses the Missouri injury report after another win for the Tigers last night. My question about the OU game on Saturday, can Mizzou football actually score enough? Also going to have an update on the quarterback position for you. Once again, before I start, I do want to tell you today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So download the FanDuel app today. And I was being a little bit sarcastic there at the top of the show because quite honestly, I do feel better after Eli Drinkwitz addressed the media today. And here was his quote. He said, "All of this stuff is just a distraction. I would like to remind everybody, including our fans, we absolutely love Mizzou. We love what we're building. My focus is going to remain on our team and on our current situation, and I am not going to get into all of that." Simply put, on the job rumors and meeting with other teams, that's, quote, not true, is what Eli Drinkwitz said here. Now, again, like I said, hey, if you're a Missouri fan, you've heard these kind of statements before. Looking at you, Mike Anderson, and also Lane Kiffin, who the past day or two here, there's been a lot of consternation that, well, Lane Kiffin has sent family members out to Baton Rouge, possibly on a little bit of a real estate expedition, that type of thing, a scouting report, a scouting mission, if you will. Well, Lane Kiffin had very similar things to say today on the Pat McAfee show about his situation at Ole Miss and all the speculation revolving if he might make a jump to LSU or Florida, of course. Well, I think a lot of what, again, if that makes you feel better, the comparisons to Lane Kiffin or not, I'm not sure if it should or not. Frankly, I don't know what to completely make of the Lane Kiffin situation. I'll just say this. I'm glad it seems like Lane and Ole Miss are back on the same page. I would, just as a fan of college football, the idea that the adults in the room would be willing to throw away a run at the college football playoff just because their egos got in the way one way or the other, that would be sickeningly sad to me. But I think one of the things that got a lot of Missouri fans, well, including myself, starting to get a little bit more worried about Drinkwitz and his status with Missouri was some relayed comments there during the Mississippi State game. And in fact, I'll read those for you verbatim, just so we know exactly what we're talking about here. Drinkwitz said, "I've got the money. It's about alignment. It's about getting people invested in the program. It's about getting the Fortune 500 companies in this state to get behind us. We've got all these Fortune 500 companies in the state, and not a single one of them advertises in the building." To which Tom Hart, the play-by-play man and a Mizzou grad, by the way, continued. He said, "That's a little bit surprising, and that's the kind of alignment you need to continue to get, to be honest, to be able to get the payroll to the point to recruit the best talent in the league." So, again, I think just that little moment there caught a lot of Missouri fans' attention, and so Drinkwitz actually addressed this directly as well. He said, quote, "I know in our pre-production meeting on Friday, they were asking about our NIL, and I said one area that I think we can improve is the utilization of our Fortune 500 companies in the state. I believe it's 11 Fortune 500 companies in the state, which is fourth largest among the SEC footprint. We are the institution of this state. We provide these companies with a lot of workers, and so it would be awesome if we could see some reciprocal investments in that. I don't think that's an unusual ask or an unusual request. Now, here's the part that I think is important. Drinkwitz continues and he says, "This is all new. I'm not assigning blame to anybody or pointing fingers at any Fortune 500 company. I'm just asking, if you're a Mizzou grad in that company and you're in charge of marketing, we would love to join in with some NIL opportunities for our student athletes." And again, to that point, "this is all new" is such an important sentence that encapsulates just about everything that's been happening in college football the past 4 or 5 years or so. And I think Drinkwitz's ability to continually navigate what is new and push forward in this sport, I think is probably, it may well be the number one, if not number two, along with just creating a great locker room culture. It's one of his absolute best attributes. I don't think there's any question about that. And I think for all the people, and including myself, yeah, those comments raise some eyebrows. But again, if you're going to push forward, it's not always going to be comfortable. So I think when Drinkwitz, kind of backpedals a little bit, he's putting the kind of messaging out there that he feels he needs to. He pushes forward, and sometimes when maybe he pushes maybe a little bit too far, Drinkwitz tends to rein it back in. I remember earlier in the season when Drinkwitz, I thought, got a little bit out ahead of his skis, kind of chastising the fans a little bit, saying, "Hey, what's taking so long to sell out here?" Well, Missouri eventually sold out that game anyway. You've noticed ever since then, Drinkwitz has done nothing but praise the Missouri fans and the sellout and all that kind of stuff. So I do think there may be a bit of that psychology at play here, where, of course, Drinkwitz he has a double-edged sword that he's wielding right now. And, of course, all college football coaches have this, which is, of course, you have to keep your fans happy, and then at the same time also continue to ask them to do more and more and more. Is that a fair ask? I'm not so sure. I think that is the reality of college football right now. And Drinkwitz continues here. He says, "If you want to build a championship team, I've got to continue to build a championship roster. What it's going to take is to push harder than I pushed to get here." And what he's talking about is getting to the next level for Missouri. Also, on that Missouri NIL, he thinks maybe there's some misconceptions out there that maybe the Missouri NIL is even better than people think. He's pushing back on that a little bit, saying that, hey, there are other places that have unlimited NIL resources. He doesn't think Missouri is top 10 out there in terms of spending, as some have speculated. But he openly says, hey, quote, "we want to beat those teams with unlimited NIL budgets." Of course, in reality, nothing is unlimited, but at some of these institutions, it certainly seems like it. And, of course, Missouri does not have unlimited quarterbacks, so it seems nice that, at the very least, Beau Pribula seems to be trending toward playing at Missouri. What does that situation look like for Saturday? Could Beau actually start at quarterback against the Sooners? Let's talk about it all coming up here in just a minute. But you know what, Missouri people, it's almost time. December 1st is almost here. It's almost time for legalized sports betting here in the state of Missouri. So December 1st, get ready. FanDuel is the place to be. And, of course, the NBA is in full swing. And if you miss the starting tip, by the way, you can always get in on the action with live bets. Keeps every game exciting, especially, when the team or player you're backing is making a late push. So right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up today to play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And on Beau Pribula, who, by the way, seems to be just progressing remarkably well on that dislocated ankle that he suffered a few weeks ago against Vanderbilt. Eli Drinkwitz says that they're going to see how Beau progresses throughout the week, and they'll update us as mandatory on the SEC availability reports. But Eli Drinkwitz gives us some more color and says that Beau is our starting quarterback. at least when he's healthy enough to return, because Drinkwitz clarifies and says that Matt Zollers is likely to be your starting quarterback still against Oklahoma this week. So what I'm taking from that is Beau is probably going to be available for the game just in case, well, Zollers could get injured, number one, but who knows, maybe in case of real inefficiency or whatever, I suppose there's a chance that Beau could play. Sounds more like that's going to be in an emergency backup capacity for Pribula. But again, Drinkwitz making it clear that Beau will be Missouri's starting quarterback this year when he's healthy enough to do so. Will that be this week? Maybe against Arkansas? Seems like almost certainly Beau will get a shot in the bowl game, it would seem to me. And, of course, Drinkwitz did still have some praise for Matt Zollers, saying the moment was never too big for him and got the game ball after the Mississippi State victory. So still a lot of hope and potential there for Zollers, without a doubt, a kid who nobody thought was going to be shot into duty this season. So let's remember Drew Lock, by the way, his true freshman season, how poorly that went statistically and just for the Missouri offense in general. I mean, my goodness, Zollers has done better than that statistically, and then Drew Lock would then go on to break SEC passing records and be a second-round NFL draft pick, and now, a 6-7 year veteran, something like that. So a lot is left to be written in the Matt Zollers story. And speaking of the Oklahoma and Arkansas games, an 11 a.m. kickoff for the OU game on ABC, and now 2:30 kickoff on SEC Network down in Fayetteville for the Arkansas game. And on this Sooners ball game, to me, I want to be more optimistic. It's just hard for me to see Missouri scoring enough against this really good Oklahoma defense. And if we can't run the ball we couldn't really against Auburn, it just seems like Missouri is in deep trouble. I have to wonder, maybe after last week, hey, obviously a much different defense in Mississippi State than Oklahoma, but maybe Missouri discovered something, at least to have the passing game open up the running game just a little bit. One thing to watch out for, not just Beau Pribula and his injury status this week, but on the other side for the Sooners, Mason Thomas, one of the best defenders in the SEC. I have to wonder if he's going to play. He missed the Alabama game last week after being injured in the Tennessee game. By the way, one note on the Mississippi State game, Marquise Speedy Johnson played just 10 snaps in the game. I thought a lot of that had to do with 2 tight end sets, a lot of those with Brett Norfleet back last week. And in previous games, especially early in the season, when Missouri ran a lot of 2 tight end action, that had come at the expense of Kevin Coleman. Well, this time at the expense of Johnson. And frankly, that makes a lot of sense to me. No offense to him. I just think you got to have Kevin Coleman on the field. And I think Coleman just probably got more comfortable in those spots as the season went along, to be in those packages on the outside in 2 tight end sets. But also, quite frankly, with Josh Manning coming on as the season has gone along, and obviously Donovan Olubade just continuing to show out, I think Johnson has maybe been passed up on the outside here as the season has gone along. You know what? Let's talk some basketball here for a little bit. Missouri wins again, remains undefeated at 5-0, 91-73. Well, over a pretty weak Prairie View A&M team last night, and really Missouri won the game. That's final score. Missouri easily, if they wanted to, could have probably won the game by 45 points the way it was going. And if you look at the Missouri metrics so far, like Ken Palm, something I frequently cite on this program, well, the Tigers are projected to be the 33rd best team in the country right now, the 13th best offense. Hey, that tracks with a Dennis Gates team. And 82nd on defense. And honestly, while 82nd is nothing to really write home about, I'll be honest, I don't see the Tigers being that good of a defensive team this season. I just don't see this particular team. It just doesn't pass the eye test to me. What can I tell you? I need to see it against higher level competition before I believe that this team is ever going to get any stops when it matters. However, I will say I'm encouraged by something that I've seen. I've seen Jacob Cruz and Javon Porter and Luke Northweather are hitting the glass. Cruz in particular, I love to see it. Obviously Cruz has shot the ball tremendously well the past 2 or 3 games here, and just in general, I think he's making. Yeah, let's check it out. I shouldn't just guess. Yes, Jacob Cruz making 62%, 13 of 21 on the season from downtown. Not too shabby. One of the most efficient players in the country so far with those shooting numbers, without a doubt. But what's more impressive to me is he's using his 6'8" frame to actually be aggressive on the defensive glass. And I do mean especially on the defensive glass. Offensive rebounds are great. Missouri simply has to be better on the defensive glass if they're going to be as good of a team as, frankly, the projections are saying that they are right now. So, again, people like Javon Porter, Jacob Cruz, Trent Pierce, who hasn't played yet, of course, Luke Northweather, too. Those are all guys who are taller players who aren't necessarily traditional big men, but they're 6'8", 6'9", 6'10". You guys can stand out on the perimeter all you want and shoot jump shots on offense. If that's what Dennis Gates wants you to do, sounds great to me. If I were a coach, I'd probably have you do the exact same thing. But here's the trade-off. On defense, you got to get your butts in the paint and rebound. That's the main thing I'm asking from all of you. And really, the last couple games, I've seen that commitment from these guys, especially, again, Jacob Cruz. I want to give him a lot of credit for that. And it was nice to see Javon Porter, by the way, get off to a little bit better of a start, knock down a couple threes early. You know, his shot's just been a little bit off. You know, a new team just seems like he's trying to find himself, though. Admittedly, I was not the biggest fan of his signing in the offseason. By the way, Anthony Robinson looked okay, had a cramp there at one point late in the game. I saw him on the bench using the old massage gun on both of his calves at one point. He played great. Doesn't seem like there's going to be any problems there. And importantly, Missouri and Dennis Gates finally gave us some actual updates on the injury situation. Dennis Gates saying that barring something unexpected, well, Honor Boateng should be playing, quote, minimal minutes in the next game for Missouri. So he's going to get his feet wet. That's good news for Missouri because I really feel like Missouri's going to need Boateng. He's a guy who has a lot of potential to be a two-way player on the wing, especially, again, the one way we really need defense. We need to be able to get some stops on the perimeter, and if Honor Boateng, well, we need him to be able to do it. Let's put it that way. Trent Pierce, on the other hand, it's kind of sounds like there's still some illness thing happening here, both waiting on some updates from a doctor. I'm not really sure what, again, if it's not an illness, forgive me because I'm not being given a whole lot of information here, but though for Dennis Gates, I guess this is a decent amount of information. And for now, Trent Burns, the 7'3", 7'4" center who's never actually officially checked into a ball game for Missouri. Well, Trent Burns is still on pace for his recovery, but is still in the no contact period. So sounds like Honor Boateng going to be back next game, going to start ramping it up slowly but surely. Trent Pierce and Trent Burns, well, your guess is as good as mine right now. Burns in particular, a guy that, again, just whatever we eventually get from him will just be a bonus at this point. You can't count on him whatsoever. And while the Tigers are surely eliminated from college football playoff contention, well, what about the 16-team era? Yeah, the Tigers might still be alive in that case. My question is, do we actually want that as fans? Let's talk about that and more right after this. So it seems like the college football playoff is inevitably going to go to 16 teams, or God forbid 24 if the freaking Big Ten gets its way, my goodness, what is wrong with these people? But I digress. I just am in the opinion, again, I was always for 8. I can live with 12. 16, now you start bringing a lot of 3-loss SEC teams into play. You think people are complaining about Alabama still being alive with 2 losses now and potentially trying to sneak their way in last season with 3 losses? Well, the Tide didn't make it. You're just going to hear endless complaints. And you know what? Those complaints, I think, are fairly valid. I think you're just, not to be a broken record, but to all the people who said, hey, this is watering down the regular season, has there been a better example than the Texas A&M South Carolina game this past Saturday, which was the game of the day? It turned out certainly the most entertaining game of the day, but really not nearly as consequential as it should have been, because had the Aggies lost that ball game, well, they still have quite a bit of margin for error. The Aggies could lose to Texas in their final game. They're playing Samford or somebody this week, but that final game to the Longhorns, you could still trip up there, even with, again, the hypothetical loss to South Carolina, and A&M still would have been in the playoff. Now, obviously, their seed wouldn't have been as good. They'd probably be out of the SEC championship. But this massive, epic comeback that the Aggies had, well, imagine if they had to have that to keep their playoff hopes alive, their national championship hopes alive. Maybe they did have it to have their SEC championship hopes alive. I'm not bothering to look at those standings right off the top of my head and figure out all the tiebreakers, I have to admit. But to me, all of this continues to be a loss for college football. And if the point of the college football playoff was to be more inclusive of the truly great group of 5 teams outside of the system, whether it was UCF circa 2017 or it was Boise State circa 2006, that run, I don't think it was meant to put a group of 5 team in there every year, especially in a run in an era here when it doesn't seem like there's a group of 5 team that is truly worthy of playing the absolute best teams in college football for a shot at the title. To me, that's another plus of the 8-game playoff. Not only does it keep the integrity of the regular season and the importance of those games at least more intact, certainly, versus 12 or 16. But to me, it's also then big enough with 8 teams that you can get a team like Boise State or UCF. They can have their shot. And frankly, I don't want to hear any complaints from one-loss group of 5 teams, quite honestly. You need to beat everybody. And that may not be unfair. And frankly, it probably is unfair. But that's college football. It's always been unfair. When it comes to settling a national champion in particular, I still think it's more fair than the BCS system was to those types of teams. But certainly I liked the regular season a little bit more under the BCS system too. So to me, and nobody's asking me, nobody's listening to me, I'm certainly not in charge, but how is 8 not the perfect number still to this day? That's just my opinion. Of course, as Dennis Miller used to say, I could be wrong. But hey, you know what's not wrong? Checking out the Locked On Mizzou podcast, nor making anything on this network your second listen, as we are the #1 sports podcasting network. So until next time, I am John Miller, and thanks as always for listening to Locked On Mizzou.